group's discussion. It was more around, Eileen just talked about transitioning from emergency to BAU, which is obviously what we're moving into.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that really, whilst QPS's example was fantastic, they were able to do that because they just carried on the processes and procedures that they put in place when there was 500 people following them. So unless we get the BAU happening, we'll never transition from BAU to emergency. And that in itself is the biggest issue that we're facing now. One of the things that Eileen did say as well was we're faced with a unique opportunity now to leverage off what's happened in QPS, to do myth busting on the risks, and actually shift that paradigm around. We should be looking at the risk of not doing something rather than the risk of doing it.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like we're in a deep evaluation phase in terms of scoping out the learnings, and I think we can really only cover so much today. And I actually do have to be conscious of time, but yeah, I think this is really the start of the discussion to think about, where do we go from here in terms of evaluating our learnings and also applying them in our organisations. So we're going to start that discussion now with a bit of a panel. We're also going to talk about what government are doing strategically and structurally to try and influence Government 2.0 change, and what they were doing beforehand. Phillip Lincoln's going to speak about that from Smart Service Queensland. But before we do that, I think it's important to talk about what Eileen just spoke about, which was what do we do with these websites? What are these organisations doing now? And I know we've heard from both Queensland Floods and Flood Aid. I want to hear from Volunteer Queensland about what's the next stage for them. They've got 80,000 volunteers registered. What's going to be the next stage of their process? And then, of course, Ergon Energy, are they still going to go online, stay online and keep online? And what's that presence going to look like? And then, of course, we'll come back to James and QPS.
I was going to make a joke, but it wasn't on yet, so you've been saved. So we're quite lucky at Volunteer in Queensland in that we got funding last year to do projects around natural disaster preparation and response and community resilience. So a lot of our responding to these disasters has been, a lot of the thinking and preparation has been done around it, and now we're just into the stage of rolling it out. So for us, a big part of the picture is that responding to a natural disaster isn't just the immediate crisis that you can see. There's a continuing crisis happening every day for many families and individuals, and it's about how do we galvanise that spirit. And everyone's spoken about this, everyone in docs, everyone, probably a lot of people at your agencies have spoken. How do we use this momentum and take it forward to work with our services to make sure the response and the recovery happens effectively and quickly, and that we're prepared for next time? So for us, this happens in community resilience projects. So we work with a variety of stakeholders. We have stuff online, we have programs offline as well, and they'll complement each other. So it's about realising that natural disaster response is more efficient and is better if we have a resilient and prepared community. And so that's what we're going to be trying to move agencies and the public and everyone into, that kind of thinking, I guess, shifting them along and moving that process.
And how are you going to do that? What's the next stage of your process?
Well, we have projects. We've got 5 projects which are going to be running for the next year or two, in the real world, offline, and they'll be complemented by online activities as well. Online, I manage the emergency volunteering portal, so it's about trying to, like I said, we launched the portal during the floods in response to the server and the registration form, but the full development of the site hadn't been done, so we're in the process of going back and redesigning that, making sure that we boost the social media components, making sure we boost the interactivity, making sure that we build effective relationships with other key stakeholders so that we can have a more collaborative and networked online community around this as well. So we're going to be moving forward, continuing with our previous plans, which were, more opportunities arose, but we also got sidetracked during the floods in Cyclone Yasi, so I guess just getting back on track and using the opportunities that come.
What are you going to do with the 80,000 volunteer registrations?
Big question. We actually are finding that our workload is steady, increasing, because the need for volunteers is increasing day by day as agencies and as people just realise the scope and the extent of what's needed in the recovery. So we have ongoing volunteer opportunities, but we're finding that whilst we have 80,000 numbers, a lot of them came from international or interstate volunteers. A lot of people volunteered to donate things, a lot of people volunteered or just they needed assistance, so they registered with us. So there's some misunderstanding around that. But also people understood, those people who registered were very time bound. So we're finding a lot of people aren't interested in still volunteering on an ongoing basis. So it's about trying to communicate, give people opportunities if they want, give them opportunities to disconnect from us if that's what they want as well, if it was a time-bound offer of assistance, and try and move them forward into that space. And
So you're contacting them all and asking them?
yeah, we've got bulk email and bulk SMS services, which were some of their services were donated during the floods and which we're continuing to use. At the moment, we're using targeted communications to key, I guess, audience segmentation who might be interested, so we don't breach Spam Act and all that kind of legal stuff. But hopefully, as we build the website, we're building in that kind of ongoing community and subscription. So that's ultimately where we're going to take them through the use of volunteer opportunities as well, which we're continuing to source.
Thanks, Kat. Ergon, what are you guys going to do? Marie and Judith, what are you doing with your website? Are you going to keep it live, Facebook and Twitter? Are you going to keep it going? What's it going to look like? What's the personality and the messages?
Well, there's been a lot of discussions around what are we doing with it now. The first reaction from management team was, now we turn it off. The event's over, let's hide it. Let's not show anyone, because there's still that risk that someone might post something that we don't want to hear and we don't want to respond to. Then there's people in the marketing group that want to take that 8,500 odd people and say, right, let's market to them and give all our messages to them. The key thing for me was we set it up for disaster response. That was what we did, that's what people signed up for. We have got evaluation periods set in place at the moment, so the management team have allowed us to keep it open, to monitor it, to understand the risk again. So at the moment, I mean, Jude, you could probably say we haven't had that many.
Very quiet.
Yeah, very quiet now that everything's been restored. So the risk of having somebody come on and rant about us or do something that wasn't linked to the topic of why we set it up has been very minimal to date. So we're starting to show them yet again that their risks, yes, and their concerns, yes, but give us an evaluation period to prove whether they are correct and how we may be able to respond. At the moment, so we're looking to just keep it as part of our disaster response. There is a longer term view that we will extend that to include all electricity outages, but we've got to have better systems in place, the core systems, to be able to deliver customer-friendly communications to those channels, because at the moment it's basically for our crews, so yeah, not customer-friendly data. But there are considerations now from our marketing team that want to have jobs and careers pages and things like that. What we're trying to do is to say, from a strategy point of view, how do our existing customers interact with us online through our website, and what are the key points do they always visit on our website? And the top page is always jobs and careers, and electricity outages following after that. So I think that tells me that yes, there is probably an opportunity for a jobs and careers page, and to leverage maybe LinkedIn, but to keep our existing page as a storms and disaster response page.
Yeah, sure. Yes, sir.
Just thinking about the outages thing, because as a consumer of electricity, obviously outages are, from my perspective, I'm looking at a job, that they're the key thing we would look at, but we can't do it when we've got no power. So what I'm wondering is how you're considering maybe leveraging the power of Facebook, iPhone and other phone apps to provide the outage information to people, and maybe a back channel chat as well.
We're currently, before the cyclones all hit, we were starting to scope out our mobile light site for outages. And then also amongst all of that was look at our secondary release, was looking at leveraging Google Maps and things like that to be able to spot where the outages are, and the potential of using the user-generated content to be able to load it and advise us as well of where outages are and things like that. So it's a longer term view though. Internally we do have, we've worked with Google Earth to actually overlay our network and give a lot of information about where lines, suppliers down at all different levels, but it's leveraging that now because it's, again, everything for us is driven by our distribution network, and then so we now come in and try to leverage that kind of information and put it in a way that's meaningful to customers.
Thanks, Maureen. James, what's the direction now? What's QPS thinking about doing with these sites? Are you still going to keep them live? Are they just going to be active in a disaster situation, or what do you think?
Well, we had them live before the disaster, and we're going to continue. Certainly, we're continuing right now with them, and into the future, we don't see any. We're providing a lot of public information outside of disasters that the public obviously find valuable. In the short term, we're looking at dealing with the growing pains of adding so many users so quickly that we had 6 months to develop a little community, and we added 160,000 people within the space of a few days, and we have to learn the new rules of how to manage a community of that size. In the longer term view, we definitely are looking very interested in sort of something we were talking about earlier, a much more dynamic and a much broader Web 2.0 sort of presence that lets us take things like community-generated data and give it much more context, localise it, make it community-focused, and just be much more dynamic and be able to react much more quickly to situations, rather than just this fire hose of information that our sites currently provide.
It's 7:15, we're finishing at 7:30. We've got drinks being served. I know I'm hungry and I'm dying to get out of the spotlight. I'm sure these guys are as well. But I want to give you an opportunity to ask them 1 or 2 questions about response and recovery, and then I'm going to ask Phillip to come up and talk about what government are doing in terms of their direction for facilitating agencies to go online and supporting them in that initiative. So has anybody got a question for the panel about recovery and rebuild and what they would advise to do in business as usual?
I'm interested in actually assimilation of the information. The idea was presented by the panel that to have basically have a front end, a public front end, and a back end. So this is kind of IT speak. I'm interested in how you actually select the information and bring it to the front end. Is it a website? Is it tweets? Is it a collection of how do you actually assimilate that information? So that's about the actual structure of a product or an app, an iPhone, whatever. The other point I was interested in is how can a government organisation which is hierarchical behave in an emergency context as a flat structure. So you see basically a flat organisation existing in society, so there's a couple of individuals that did some interesting stuff, that's great. You actually see some organisations that behave in a flat context as well, such as Google and some other medium or small sized businesses. How do you actually connect a hierarchical government with people that are more than willing in their personal time or in their company time to provide these very useful services?
Very difficult question and very detailed question. I'm sure there'll be lots of people who will want to discuss that over drinks. Is there anyone in particular you want to ask that question of on the panel?
Why not?
Everybody braces.
Yeah, Tim, the question between the front and the back end, I'm sure you can handle that.
Well, happy to answer that. I think the first question that has to be asked is who owns it. The government currently operates as a whole bunch of separate silos with a Premier's department over the top, and generally speaking that's the rule. I'm not saying that's exactly the way it works. Maybe I'll answer the second part of your question first. I think the flat structure hierarchy shift can happen fairly easily through position descriptions. I think in position descriptions you can trust certain levels of staff to do certain levels of things. You do that now and again, and that can include how to operate in maybe non-business as usual situations where you can maybe get them to exceed, step above their pay grade effectively and do something that they're a subject matter expert on and deal with that as appropriate in a flat way. So that's not really my area of expertise, but I think that's something that you can do. We saw it done this time around. In relation to the front end, back end stuff, the first thing that has to happen is you've got to know who's going to own it. You've got to have a front end. So someone has to control that. And in the government, one agency is going to want to own that. A shared agency situation, maybe the shared services agency might be the place to hold that, or maybe the Premier's department, but that's something obviously you guys have to figure out yourselves. How you feed it's actually fairly simple. Databases in every level of government contain all sorts of information. They can all be made to talk together really easily. It's about what needs to be consumed by the public and how. So forget the website for a minute. Think about the fact that you're trying to communicate information about something, and it's a two-way scenario. So first of all, government holds information that the public need to have access to. And they need to access it based on their circumstances, not necessarily based on a standard format response. That's fine in a lot of cases where you have a policy response to a certain thing, like you're requesting information about your Centrelink benefits or something like that. But when an individual needs information about their situation that maybe crosses several different agencies, they need to be able to access that information in a way that can pull that information together. And that's what websites can do. Mashups can do that. They can pull information from multiple agencies based on shared database fields that says this